understood.
All right, so,
I understood totally.
Clary?
Yeah, I think Bishop Perry is good.
As Episcopalians, as followers of Jesus, as people of faith, we mourn the recent loss of life in Afghanistan, the ongoing chaos and instability, and the risk that many Afghans face, in particular, women and girls. The situation in Afghanistan is changing quickly, with many lives lost and thousands more at risk. Current crisis leaves over 5 million displaced Afghans in the country, in bordering nations, and many more around the world who have been evacuated, who are trying to find long-term safe solutions. As Afghans arrive to the U.S. with the hope of safety, the Episcopal Church, the work of Episcopal Migration Ministries, is assisting our new neighbors through the Afghan Parolee Support Program. This new U.S. program, dependent on private resources and community-led welcome and support, will provide security and foundation necessary for arriving Afghans to begin life in the U.S. The ministry of offering welcome to those fleeing violence is nothing less than God's word, one that calls us to walk the way of love as Jesus of Nazareth taught us, through compassion, through practical care, showing to our newest neighbors that we are neighbors. Episcopal Migration Ministries has launched a special appeal, Neighbors Welcome, Afghan Allies Fund, to meet the financial and in-kind needs necessary to provide adequate housing, basic services, and long-term support. The needs are great and will require our communities and congregations to come together to contribute financially, offering housing, volunteer, and pray. You can also stay involved in the work of advocacy in ensuring that the government of the United States honors its commitment to our Afghan allies. Included with this video, there are links and information sources that can assist you in participating in any way that you can. As Episcopalians in the late 1930s rose up to respond to allies, primarily Jewish allies fleeing tyranny in Europe, the advent of the Second World War, as Episcopalians have continued to rise up wherever and whenever there has been human need, joining hands with other peoples of faith and people of goodwill. So now I invite you to rise up again for our Afghan friends, to stand with them in their time of need. Thank you for all that you do. Thank you for this work. Thank you for anything that you can do. God love you. God bless you. May God bless people of Afghanistan, wherever they may be. Amen.
I actually saw part of that on the news when I was actually in a waiting room at Roswell. And I was like, wow, so powerful, really moving. I have to go back and listen to the whole thing because they had just a partial of it, which is how I got involved with this. It was like, boy, this is a directive coming right from our presiding bishop. Then I saw on Channel 2 News them getting off the airplanes with sandals on and how cold they were. So that's how I got the socks. And then when I delivered the socks, Kathy at Spielman at Journey's End said, well, how big is your church? Could you do a home again project?
It's a very big building.
Yeah, I go, oh, we are large in many ways, so, she gave me the particulars. Backing up to the presiding bishop, I did attend seminars from, EMM, Episcopal Migration Ministries. They had this enormous program calling Neighbor to Neighbor, as if our church would actually support a family, but we would have to navigate all the paperwork, the social services, get the kids into school, get them SNAP programs. I'm like, no, 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 which is basically the other arm of it, 2 different points that we would go through Journey's End and help out there. So that's how we are involved. I don't know, do we have time to show the Journey's End one? If we don't,
I think I'd rather hold it.
okay,
It's a very good video and not all that long, but given the other things that are coming today, and I would like to have a session at which we tell what it is we did with respect to Home Again. In other words, we give the story that you're giving in little now, we spread out a bit, and we have some exhibits and, illustrations of what we did, photos taken at the Home Again, moving in, and I'd really like to.
Let me ask this, if we go to the Journey's End website, can we access that video directly through them?
Yes, it's a, we can give,
I
we,
can send it around.
yeah, the video link is available on
Is there a
online.
possibility that report back could be done not to this small group of people who already know it, but during worship service? So that we can reach some more people?
What do I hear? What do I hear?
Yes, amen, brother.
Give them 5 minutes at least.
Yeah, right, then,
Well,
yes.
I was thinking more like 15.
I said at least, I said at least.
Let it replace the sermon. The, back when I was doing the so-called chancel plays, which are actually those nave plays in the central aisle mostly, we replaced the sermon. And so I see no reason why the chief liturgist here could not grant us the same permission.
I don't think it's replacing the sermon. I think it's a different
Well,
format.
no,
for a
it
sermon.
replaces
So
the.
let's not call it replacing. Let's call it reformatting.
Good. Okay. Well, it takes the time of the pulpit sermon.
I understand.
Okay, that's the.
In addition. So basically, as an update, we're totally on board. St. Martin in the Field is working diligently. I think they already have completed their box for the young kids room. We're working on the furniture list. I'm actually going to see some of it this week just to make sure that it's the number of inches and that kind of thing, and double checking on trucks. And if not, I do have a backup. I have a plan B. They're doing a great job up in Youngstown. They're doing 2 rooms. They're doing the bathroom as well as another children's room. So basically, the challenge now is the apartment. So although we're down to like maybe 3 items left for everything that we have done, the kitchen is done, the children's bedrooms are done, and then we have the other group, like a doormat and a flashlight, things like minor little things. Other than that, we're done, which means then we're in the holding pattern that once they have an apartment, they call us and we go there. There are several places, churches and synagogues in front of us who are ready to go. Between the winter and no one moving out and the availability of apartments and the stipend is very low that the government is paying for apartments. I guess I can share with you, they're looking for anything less than $1,200 a month.
Wow.
Which is
3 or 4 bedrooms?
at least 3 bedrooms. So Kathy's beyond herself. They're doing everything they possibly can. Actually, there's a whole program set up to ask us to write letters to our congressmen to increase that so that they can get housing. They are living right now in hotel rooms. And then the hotel rooms are the ones that have a little kitchenette in it, so they're able to cook their own food. So,
Does that mean there are people here in Buffalo
oh
waiting?
yeah, there's over 300 of them.
Oh, there are?
Yeah. So they're all
We're
waiting.
not waiting for them to arrive in Buffalo.
No, they're here. They are
Well,
here. So.
There may be new arrivals, as I understand it, because they've doubled the number of Afghans coming to Buffalo.
Yes.
So I think there's another wave of people coming who, and it's why my hope is we can do this again. That's my hope, not immediately, but with the next group.
Since we already have sort of commandeered space in the narthex for collecting items to distribute, and we transition that space to be a space where there are either letters already printed up to members of Congress or samples that people could write on their own and have people write letters on the spot to do this.
Yes.
That's a great idea.
From advocacy experience in the past, there are multiple levels at which you can affect your Congress people. The single most effective one is going in person to their office or when they're in town and making themselves available, speak to them face to face. Second one is a handwritten letter. So these are important letters.
Oh, not email.
Phone calls, emails and phone calls are down the way as far as their effectiveness.
And that's what they encourage you to do
They get
on their websites.
Yeah, they just like,
Yeah.
download this
So-
and sign your name.
Right.
Well,
So they just get those in the mail.
and then that's the last you hear.
But
Well,
So-
but they log them, and the handwritten letters, I'm not sure if they're logged differently or not, but I think the common wisdom is that the more effort you put into making the contact, in person is best, handwritten is second, you know, just, that's how they factor it into their tallies. And on a rare, like I said, on rare, usually you're gonna get to one of their aides with the written thing.
Oh, I know who that is. Yeah.
But when you can be there in person, when they're face to face, that is the most effective. And I know that we periodically get these notices that so-and-so's in town, having one of these things at the community center or whatever. Go, tell them this matters to you.
So, we're basically gonna be in a holding pattern. I mean, we're 90% there, so we just have to wait. Double checking on the furniture and then the truck. We have adults to move things and young kids to clean and, so all systems are go.
And we would be nowhere, Bill, without your leadership.
Yes,
Thank
yeah.
you so much, Karen.
It's been
Yeah,
fun.
it's a huge project. Amazing.
I mean, all the background work that you've done, and you've just given us a snippet of it today. The hours.
This is not a memorial service.
No.
No, we're not done. We're not done.
This this is a recruitment service.
Yeah.
As will be
She's
the
asked for the
report
things
about
she
what
talked
was
fire
accomplished.
about.
Here's the next step.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
I'll keep everyone posted.
Thank you so much.
Well, can we get something in the newsletter right away that we'll be setting up in the narthex?
Yes, I think we should work on the character of that so that we match as closely as possible what Chuck has just described in terms of effort levels. So we give samples and so on, but encouragement with bullet point, a
We
bunch
can
of stuff,
also hand out
reminders.
flyers of where people's offices are and what their phone numbers are if they'd like to go bang on the door.
Great idea.
It is possible to make a point.
Remember some of this, Bill, so that when we talk, we can. I'm writing, but I'm thinking and I'm trying to monitor the time. And
So
Spent
these
30
are
years
national-
making
these are
appointments
national
to talk
policy
to
issues,
these
like that,
guys.
understanding? These are national policy issues, right? Not local
Yes.
policy.
Yep. Because that, without
Those
getting into
Congress
it, like,
people and senators.
yeah,
Congress
it's the
people.
parolee status gets less money than a refugee than versus an immigrant. So it's all in definition. So, they have to, and then also as well, the paperwork for them to be able to work here is just stagnating. Kathy told the story about a doctor and a pharmacist, a woman who's a pharmacist, to be able to get her license to practice here, is an arduous task.
Oh, that's because you might get a doctor and pharmacist like the Reinsteins, who started organizing Socialist Worker Party stuff.
we keep those. Shall we transition?
Yes, thank you for the time.
The creation care topic for today is trying to get a focus which is closer to home. that is, it gets into our daily life, and it gets into what I consider our style of life, and a allegory, a story, which is told from the pulpit on a fairly regular annual cycle, of the prodigal son came to me. And I think I would characterize our current civilization in the West as an illustration of the prodigality of that person, the son. The end of that story has a fatted calf. And what I fear is the fatted calf is not going to be available for the next generation or 2 generations on from now. So the story has a different ending if the prodigality is not addressed. So that's a big frame for the little stuff we do. And we set out 23 possible topics,
Thank you.
and Jeremy can put them on the screen. It's called Green Home. Yeah. No. Yeah. No. No numbers. Okay.
Yeah, they don't have word themselves on it.
Okay.
So I have to talk to Sonia about that because it was, and now it's on again.
It's transformation. Anyway, the ones that have been passed out here and the ones that were in the e-letter, I think had a, well, maybe they didn't in the e-letter, now that I think of it, had numbers. In order to illustrate what it is, I think what I want to do with this, and what Bill and I have talked about, is he and I give an illustration of something that we do, which was the overcoming of an impediment to changing what we do, changing how our way of life is ingrained and needs shifting. Bill, we didn't talk about who'd go first. I'm prepared, or you can?
I'll go first if you want.
Yeah, sure.
Let's start with composting. We have a relatively small space, largely in the shade, where we could put a compost facility. Several years ago, I bought a plastic garbage can and drilled holes in it to try and compost in that, so I could move it around in the driveway to catch the sun. It was fine for a couple of years until hornets took up residence in the compost heap. And as I moved it one day, I was attacked by a large swarm of hornets and was literally laid up for about 2 days.
Oh my God.
So we abandoned that. In the meantime, we've managed to reduce our garbage considerably by filling up the recycle bin with stuff. Even if it doesn't get recycled, at least we're trying. So it became an issue of how do we compost? Well, we finally got a container for the kitchen counter that we put all the compostables in compostable bags. And number 19, I think, is keep your freezer full to run more efficiently. And as we fill up the bags until we can walk to the recycle collection point, we store it in the freezer. Well, I'm not sure how efficient that is, but we do then periodically walk the couple of miles to and from the recycle, the compost collection point.
Of which there are 3 in Buffalo, I learned.
Yeah, Well,
Two permanent ones and one that's, I guess, yeah, you probably know better.
no, I only know of two of them, and I only know of the other one because Bob looked it up. But
Okay, Massachusetts Avenue project, which,
Ron.
is,
And let's see, if Jeremy could show you the other one. It's coming, it's on Elmwood Avenue at the corner of St. James.
that's right.
Okay, and those are the only two permanent ones that I could find on the current Buffalo,
I thought this was considered a non-permanent one, but okay, maybe.
the,
If you're in the, if you're in the
There are-
city, there was an email recently that gave you information about how to compost in Buffalo.
Right,
You can do
and
it.
the
Only
other-
3 locations, which is a bit annoying.
oh, and it gave 7 locations. And then it turned out that the other 5 are seasonal at the farmers markets. And maybe there was actual composting at the farmers market. I didn't check that this past summer, but I certainly am going to check it on the next round. However,
if there are points in the suburbs, you undoubtedly have to drive to them, which
and we don't know about the suburbs.
And then while you wait in line, you're,
Anyway,
No,
back,
no, there are options that we don't do in Buffalo. In our daughter's hometown, they have these little bitty plastic bins, kind of like the big ones, which are just for recycle, for compostable. People can put yard waste and so forth in. That's something that our community could be doing. Making it curbside.
well, I read in the Washington Post this week that in Wales, they are actually recycling disposable diapers and using the byproduct to pave roads. And they're not sure how
not exactly
long
compost.
this will last, but it's an experiment in recycling. And in the article, it talked about mandates in Wales for recycling and composting. And one of the things that they mentioned was that very sort of composting.
And one of the principles they illustrate is that sometimes public policy has to change for things to become economically feasible.
Exactly.
Otherwise it gets cheaper just to put things in landfills.
Yeah,
Right, and sometimes the public policy backfires because it goes to China and China says, this is dirty, recycle.
We don't,
Well,
and
We
they
don't want it anymore,
and
and
they stop taking it.
this article that I read moved me to look up Milorganite, which I had not heard of since I was a child. But since the idea of recycling sewage water as fertilizer originated in Milwaukee in 1911. And in 1925 or 26, they opened a municipal facility to do this on an industrial scale and sell the fertilizer, which apparently you can still buy. So I don't know why, and I'm going to try and find out more, why we couldn't in the city at least do something that would help defray the cost of doing some sort of composting and recycling and save, at least put that money that we now spend into shipping things to landfills into something useful.
Would you recommend something like having those orange bins in neighborhoods?
Well, that's one thing. I think as a first step, we could organize another letter writing campaign or door banging opportunity to go talk to our council members or county legislators about doing that. Just this morning, as I was getting dressed, I was thinking there's a large riding stable just within walking distance of my house. I'll bet they have plenty of stuff that could be used for fertilizer.
I believe that most of the composting from animal stables to zoo has already been absorbed into some cycle where it's worth something, and they're selling it. Well, I'm not absolutely sure of that, but
Yeah,
you know,
well-
that,
Well,
I did elephant poo shoveling it myself at the zoo 30 years ago. And then discovered I couldn't do it anymore. And the reason I was given was that they were selling.
Well,
Oh,
so there is already some sort of
there is
stream
boutique
of,
compost available.
well, there's a stream of leading from poo to market.
Right. And we,
Maybe we could tap
we-
into something.
yeah, we need to investigate. I think, you know, the first thing is to find out what the situation really is
Yeah,
and the various costs. Every time you do a cost analysis of one of these things, you know, economists are doing it all the time. And I'm very suspicious of many of the analyses because they take current costs of things like water and all sorts of stuff, which is filled with carbon miles. I mean, you know, all kinds of bad stuff and that don't represent the real costs at all. But also you have the micro steps of handling and things like cans in every neighborhood place the burden in part upon the city's apparatus for collection, which involves a lot of people and hands and so on. Not terrible job.
One of the things that they did in Wales was to reduce the number of times that they picked up garbage as an incentive to recycle and compost.
Did they go more than a week? Did they go more than a week?
Yeah, I think,
They did.
I don't remember.
I don't remember that.
I think it said once every 2 weeks in some places.
I would make it.
I mean, our trash tote usually takes 3 weeks to fill up.
Yeah, we need to go smaller when our place.
Yeah, that's one of the things I was hoping we could at some point engage a group of St. Paulers on is to measure our waste. And I mean, we're down to the can with the true waste, the blue can in Buffalo, doesn't move but once every 3 or 4 weeks because we don't have enough. Because we haven't, I have some compost stories beyond this one that I could tell. But the packaging that comes in is just, I'm going to have a packaging when we're done with this topic. I'm going to have a packaging thing to talk about. Let's hang on to this topic long enough to sort of have as a group feeling Bill's proposal. That is, that we investigate possibilities of advocacy around something sensible that the city could do connected with composting, at least. That strikes me as, you know, we have to think about people who live in apartments because they have problems of, they can't keep garbage around too long in their apartment without having the thing stink. I live in a private house. I have 5-gallon cans outside. Marcy and I have a system of 6 of them for the winter. And all the vegetable waste goes in that in a series and gets dumped in our compost bin, where we did have the hornet problem at one point, but I was not daunted. We got a bin. I've made about 3 of them, 3 bins out of wood, and now we have a plastic bin, which is, you can remove it from the bottom, the soil from the bottom as it's created, and keep adding at the top. And so far, we haven't had a hornet's infestation.
How about rats?
And rats, that's the other one, right? We have had rats. Rats exist in the city willy-nilly. You can't not have rats around. The question is, are you providing the habitat and the food?
Yeah.
And it's largely habitat that compost piles have a possibility.
One of the tricks to avoiding any kind of vermin in compost is getting the temperature high enough. That's a trick. I'm not sure we've solved that one yet.
Well, you know, the other thing is to not let it just sit. So when I add more to the compost pile, I usually take the garden fork and
Do some mixing.
And, you know, do some shifting of what's already in there and what I'm adding, so that I'm not adding just fresh scraps, you know. I'm adding fresh scraps, but I'm then mixing it in with the existing stuff, so. And I did, I'm trying to think, one time I did have a bee's nest in my
I mean,
Yeah.
they're,
Which is not surprising because we've actually got yellow jackets that nest in brown.
yeah, right. And so you have to figure out ways of dealing with what nature's gonna throw back
Yeah.
at you. It's, you know, that's part of,
Yeah, so I have a
Okay.
yellow jacket trap that, if, you know, if it happens again, I still have my.
And I have my own story very briefly to share of a composting system that didn't work for me, but it might work for somebody else. I fish. I tried vermiculture, which is an indoor,
right.
temperature controlled, lower temperature thing where you let worms help do the job of breaking things down. Similar process. You limit what you put in there. And it worked sort of, except that it is not a great indoor project, but you've got a good basement spot to keep things dry. And anyway,
Is there anyone
Try.
on Zoom who wants to add thoughts and experiences about composting? All right,
Could I add one or two other quick points that I kind of occurred to me as I was thinking about this. One is that we're retired and have time, and we have a private residence, so we have some space. I doubt that, well, and since we have time, we don't buy hardly any processed food anymore. So that saves on a lot of packaging. 25 years ago, when we had kids in the house and both were working and doing all sorts of kids' activities, we probably relied more heavily on more heavily processed stuff. So for young people, it's harder to do some of these things that we're talking about. And are there ways that we can think of to support other folks who are not as able to spend the time on some of the things we talked about? I mean, getting composting facilities nearer than a 2-mile walk would help. I mean, if we're going to encourage people to do stuff, it's got to be easy.
one point. Does have a second one?
I miscounted. There was just one.
Okay. It's a complex point. It could count for two.
But that's an interesting point. So like in doing my investigation of like, I'm into this downtown alliance, who's around here, who do we want to target market ultimately when we have a flyer for April 23rd? So there's 115 apartments at M&T Bank Plaza. So how are they recycling? Are they just throwing their garbage
You
down?
mean Seneca One, right?
Yeah, Seneca One. So that,
M&T Bank Bus is the one over there.
I qualify that. by the name.
whatever name is on the building these days,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, right,
The
right.
Seneca One is the official name. It'd be interesting to see how they do it.
Well, they do probably, I imagine they have in the basement some recycle bins. They
Right.
probably have central garbage.
A shoot for one and a shoot for the
Yeah,
other.
well, maybe
That's a good
not a
question, though.
chute, but they probably have to take their stuff down in an elevator, I would imagine.
Well, we can
This
put it
is
better
this
than
is
that.
something that
Kathy,
it needs to be
Kathy,
known, and we go and investigate.
Yeah.
Right.
It's not.
Do you have, Kathy, at your place, do you have your own recycling bin, or does the apartment have one?
We're in condos, and so there are 3 recycle totes and 6 garbage totes. And then we just fill them. You don't keep it at your own unit. They're all in the back parking lot. And then you just fill them.
So it's
But
probably a similar
we're
pattern,
having
I'm
a
guessing.
problem because people are doing, I just tell you, so we're having a problem. So people are doing construction and they're putting the construction waste in the back parking lot and we are getting rats. I'm very, very upset right now. I mean, they're on my porch. They're on my front porch. And so, and I've not had a problem. I did when I lived on Elmwood, was right next to the restaurants there, you know, and I had, problem there. But on Summer Street, I've not had a problem and we've had the totes, you know, are really good, but now the totes aren't being used properly. And so, I'm going right now. I don't want to think about composting. I don't want to have anything, you know.
Take it away, take it away.
Well,
Yeah,
that's why the built communities that have established community composting have, again, impermeable bins for putting the compostable in.
yeah,
Because anytime you leave it out, it's edible, something's gonna eat it.
so, yeah, and they like cardboard and it's like, yeah. So like these apartments are probably better managed. I mean, it's hard because it's a condo without a really association, you know, so nobody's really in charge of seeing that it's done properly, yeah. But it just, and I can't speak for Seneca Wind, but I know my daughter who lives in a very large building in New York, but they have compost, recycle, and trash facilities for all three, yeah. And so hopefully.
And interestingly, when you have a higher population density, it's more efficient to get those things
It is,
done. Because
yeah.
you've got 300 people in a building.
Right,
just in a
right.
big building. Their compostables are worth collecting.
Yeah,
Given how recently Seneca One was rehabbed, to become residential, they should have a fairly up-to-date system,
yeah.
let's hope.
One would hope so.
If Buffalo supports such a system.
Or the developer,
You know, I think we
you
need
know, I
to
mean,
find out
we can find out.
which are the cities that are doing best with this and
Yeah,
try and contact somebody there to find out what they do. And be in a position to advise our.
Yeah, I think it's
This is
pretty
getting
evident.
to be a huge project.
I think we're in baby steps in Buffalo still, as far as year in, year out composting. They have the seasonal collections of yard waste, you have special bags that you got separate out from the rest of things. That stuff gets composted, I think. You know, leaves and grass and so forth, but that's kind of seasonal.
Yeah.
Right. May I suggest, my eye is on the clock at this point, that I sense that we have people who are really interested in this topic, sitting at this table and probably also on the screen, and that we should be able to form some kind of process among us, which will do the investigation, leading to some recommendations about things that might be done. And that this is one of the follow-ons from today. I was just really hoping that today would produce material which would give us enthusiasm for future work. And so, you know, known suspects, I don't need to name you, we're all in it. And I'll produce some notes and we'll go from there on this topic. The thing I'd like to talk about, the thing I prepared most today, was a little story about my own waking up to the prodigality of a particular subset of what we do. 2 years ago in March, we learned we were in a pandemic. I was standing in the customer space of Aroma Cafe, which is owned by an Italian-American couple, and it's at the corner of Bidwell and Elmwood, which provides a wonderful walk for me, which is a very important part of how I got into the story, because it is part of my exercise plan to walk to and from Aroma. The time I was talking with Reno, the owner, he was looking extremely upset because our governor and the public health authorities had said restaurants had to basically shut down, or they were at the beginning of the process of shutting down. And I guess the second time I had him, he really was in the, I'm not in business anymore. I'm going to go out of business. And so I said to him, I find this walk so important, and your sandwich, especially your veggie sandwich. I've been trying to move away from beef and all kinds of other stuff to be an important lunch item for me, and I'm going to try to do it every day. What's the picture? Of the vow. So that's what every day looks like. That's 1 week's worth of what I created in the form of a byproduct, a not intended consequence. But once you think about it, you obviously created it as part of the intention of wanting to do what was in it. I wasn't eating in the restaurant. I couldn't eat in the restaurant. It was takeout. Think of what this did in the country as a whole. This country, which specializes in meeting our needs, specializes in the choices we make. Choice is up to you. It took me a year to get down to the lower half of this slide. Okay? Here's what I was putting into the garbage. You look on this, is there a recycle number on it? No, there's no recycle number on it. Some of them, a lot of them, they say they're compostable. Yeah, in an industrial composter, because they need to be shredded and get incredibly long time. They need to be soaked. It's an impossible task for the average person. So where do they go? The blue tote, the garbage one. So what he did was this. The paper bag and a small dish. And I said, I got resistance at first because the public health laws say you cannot reuse the packaging. That's the theory of the thing. I know everybody at Aroma. I said, this is a law which is stupid from the point of view of this particular type of use. I'm the one that's eating the food. If you just package the food the way I ask, I take it home and I eat it and I don't get sick because I'm cleaning these. I'm throwing them out when they get too dirty and something. And I also discovered I could take an intermediate product known as wax paper and reuse it many more times than the absorbent surface of this. Aroma depends upon a kitchen, which is on Bryant, because it's a family-owned set of businesses. So the sandwiches are pre-made that come to Aroma, and they all have cling wrap around them. Yards and yards of cling wrap. I don't know. I don't know how to get rid of the cling wrap. Anyway, they were taking the sandwich out of the cling wrap and putting them into this for a year. For a year. Just think of the number of boxes that would have to be in this room to represent all the stuff I wasted during that year.
And then why they were didn't just distribute them in the cling wrap?
Well, the cling wrap is because they sit around for a long time.
No,
And-
why wouldn't they just serve you the sandwich in the cling wrap?
Oh, that's exactly what, after a year, you go in here in the cling wrap
Oh, okay.
and reuse this. I have solved in a very tiny way at an enormous expanse of learning the problem of takeout from this particular restaurant for this particular item. Now, let me just give you one other thing. One other thing.
This is to make you think they don't produce the sandwiches there, they have to be packaged someplace else, brought to there, then they're repackaged, which is the bizarre part to me.
Yeah, but this package is a perfectly reusable one, especially since I like butter block. They've got waxed paper bags, so they're perfect because there's sometimes a little grease on the outside of the cling wrap. And it resists going through. But the next step that I'd like to actually undertake, I have not really done it. I don't know why I haven't, but I don't eat out, I guess is the main reason. Marcy and I have been to China a couple times. I've been one more time than she has. And the first time it was with Pano Urakaris, a physician whose family was at the University of Buffalo. And he and I were asked by our employer, healthcare plan, to go to China and see whether we could offer some technical assistance to them and the Family Practitioner Training Institute for the forming of HMOs. And we went out to dinner with his good friend, who was a physician in China. And we went to a Sichuan restaurant. They'd been in Sichuan during the Cultural Revolution and had learned how to cook Sichuanese and so on, but they took us to a restaurant to do this. And we had a beautiful Chinese banquet. And at the end, there was a ton of food left. Well, these people had learned privation, so they were not about to let what happened would in an American restaurant, it will go into the garbage. You know, what is it? 1/3 of America's food gets wasted. Out come a set of nesting stainless steel dishes with tight lids, set of square things, and everything that was in front of us got scooped into them and went home. And I just thought, oh my gosh, what a great
They
system.
took their own dishes.
And they took their own, yes, they
Yeah.
brought their own. So it's once again, it's like this system. You can, instead of recycling, I used to think, oh, reuse, recycle, you know,
Reduce, reuse, recycle. That's the mantra.
but no, reuse, 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 reuse before you get to recycle. Because the reuse portion of it, I have several other illustrations, which I don't have photos of at the moment, of what happens in our house, because we came to the reuse realization in little years and years ago, because we're so frugal, you know, little picky people saving all kinds of stuff. And we didn't make it part of our overall thing. We're past the time. I gotta stop. Anyway, we're on the way with one, at least, thing from this that's.
Well, I think your illustration, though, one thing that we've done that's related to that one there, I'm not gonna buy plastic wrap anymore. I'm not buying plastic wrap anymore. I've learned that's not recyclable at all. Part of what we've been doing is reusing. We still have the thing for Chinese food. We still get our Chinese food, and it comes in plastic tubs, which we've learned are not really recyclable.
Yeah.
I now have stacks, above our sink, stacks of the things. And what I used to wrap in plastic to put away, or occasionally still put like an old cereal bag to put away, it now goes in those tubs.
That's what
They're gonna get reused and reused and reused until they can't get reused anymore. And maybe someday before I'm dead, the industry will figure out, the industry will be forced to begin recycling those things.
So
I'm gonna keep them until the industry has it figured out.
sevenfold reuse before you go to recycle.
But they're very handy. I mean, the only trick is making sure the lids fit. Because you got too many different configurations.
They're slightly different.
But that's where my leftover pizza goes, that's where my brownies go, that's where, I mean, those
Yeah,
tubs
yeah.
they're our new kitchen storage system.
Well, even these are the paper ones, the styrofoam finally has been outlawed.
Yeah, these are not styrofoam
Yeah, and
mackerels.
then
so-
like,
but-
we had 500 of the styrofoam ones in the basement we cleaned out from the chicken dinners that were left over.
Yeah,
We're like,
right.
oh my God, what are we gonna do with all these boxes?
Yeah, so, one of the things that I keep thinking I'd like to get or borrow is a shredder for the composting. Because, leaves don't compost very well because they're big and they're flat. But if I can shred them, then you can shred that, and I can shred, peels and other things that don't compost well unless they're in pretty small pieces.
I have one question. It's really on recycle. Yeah. So I get two print newspapers a day. This is a lot of recycle.
When are you gonna wean yourself? I have to do it too. I
I know.
love newspapers.
So I
That's
just,
why you're so smart.
To pet shelters.
Yeah.
right, well, because, all right, well, that's good to know. And I was taking them out and the construction worker was next door and he said, can I have those? And I said, sure. So, but I don't like digital, but is it better for the
right.
planet
Oh, yeah.
if I read digitally?
Yeah.
That
I
was
have
my
the same
question.
problem.
I
Yeah,
thought newspapers were recycled.
they are. But they can be used rather than recycled.
Okay,
Which goes back
But
to.
given the Canadian forests that are sometimes forbidden to us because of various jockeying,
right,
we'd be
right.
better off not having the paper used
Well,
in the
that's what
first
I'm
instance.
just saying.
So,
In fact, I'm
you know.
reading Overstory right now, which is kind of a weird novel, but anyway, it is talking about preserving the trees. Yeah.
have you
and so
tried
on.
different kinds of devices for your reading? Because that's one of the things. I dislike Kindle and iPad, but they have a format which gets closer to.
To the Buffalo
Possibility.
News, I don't mind reading online because they do it just like the paper. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I still like my
Yeah,
newspapers.
I like it. Okay, but,
I don't know, it's gonna take me a while to wean off that Sunday New York Times.
but we have to wean ourselves,
have that
Kathy. That's
magazine.
I
one
don't,
of the
I
things.
don't get the Sunday Times. Once I realized it cost $10, I go, you know what? I don't get $10 worth out of this paper.
There's actually two versions, one is 6 and one's 10,
Yeah.
just so you know.
Newspapers cost that much.
Yeah.
It's not worth $10.
No, $6 either, right?
The public library gets the New York Times magazine.
They do have the magazine, yeah, and
Check it
that's,
out for 7 days.
that's what I do, yeah,
Do we have a prayer?
yes.
Sarah, would you give us a prayer, or Kathy, you give us a prayer?
I'll give us a prayer. All right. Our dear Lord, we thank you for the world that you have given us and for calling us to preserve this creation for ourselves and for our children and for our grandchildren and for all those around the world. And we pray especially today for those in need, like the ones in Afghanistan, where the resources are not nearly enough to support the population, that you would find in our hearts a way to provide for those needs. All this we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
I'm very worried about the Afghans who are still in Afghanistan.
Oh, yeah.
It's terrible over there. Terrible.
Very realistic.
Bob, thank you very much.
So,
Yes.
does anybody have a problem that I took a picture of us that I could put on the website? I mean, I don't have anything.
No problem. I signed my waiver.
I forgot to give Jeremy his time. Jeremy has a nut. Well, we didn't get to the topic, because I was going to do paper towels.
That's right.
Here, I wanna take one.
Sorry.
I want,
No, I have to say, Bob, we don't use paper towels at home at all.
Yeah, well, we haven't bought paper towels in
No.
over the years.
Yeah, we use, I mean, it's basically rags, but we just, we wash them.
I got it. I have a little topic on that.
Okay. All my towels look really awful, but.
But then I'm like, but then I wash them, so do I spend more on washing
Ah,
them
you
than
Well,
know,
I
you
know
must
it.
think
That's
about all the steps,
And I
right?
said, so
That's
say-
very
my
good.
husband's like, you spend more time rinsing everything out with the water than you are with the.
So
Yeah,
you're taking,
I do it more for expense. I mean, it's cheaper for me to wash than to buy
Bob, I
paper
did- I should look
towels.
at-
Yeah.
Yeah, the location for composting right there, I should have looked at that.
You know what I also do? I put, aluminum foil balls in my dryer.
Oh, yeah, someone else said Becca uses tennis balls.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's for the downside.
Yeah,
Oh, here, let me shut this off.
I do use dryer sheets.
Email.
because otherwise everything sticks.
It's in South Buffalo someplace. There's a South Buffalo location for composting. I thought that was permanent. Bye, everybody.
I see that.
Bye.
Anybody here in South Buffalo?
I see that a little.
Is relevant?
Yeah, I think.
There was a South Buffalo